Every week, Hillsdale College President Larry P. Arnn joins Hugh Hewitt to discuss great books, great men, and great ideas. This is the Hillsdale Dialogues, part of the Hillsdale College Podcast Network. More episodes at podcast.hillsdale.edu or wherever you find your audio. Also at the Hillsdale College Podcast Network, check out the Radio Free Hillsdale Hour, the Hillsdale College K-12 Classical Education Podcast, The Larry P. Arnn Show, and more, all at podcast.hillsdale.edu.
Morning glory, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. That music means, of course, the Hillsdale Dialogue is on tap. Every week we go very high. At the end of the week, the last radio hour of the week is the Hillsdale Dialogue. For the last few weeks, it's been Plato's Republic. We'll go back to that next week. But Dr. Larry Arnn is available to us this Friday, and he joins us now. Good morning, Dr. Arnn. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I am great. School has begun at Hillsdale. How did the start of the school year go? And I want to preface, I have a friend whose daughter just enrolled, and you met up with him, Maureen, who was just in love with the campus, and it does look beautiful. Does anyone ever visit in the winter so they know what's coming?
Yeah, all the best people do, and you have to. But, it's, I think we have 70,000 visitors a year to our campus now. We're working on building a hotel. So it's a tourist attraction.
70,000 visitors?
Yeah, it's crazy.
That's nuts. I thought I knew everything about Hillsdale. I didn't know that. You should build a hotel. I've stayed in your hotel, and it's nice, but it's small.
Yeah. So it's the hotel makes a little money, and we do. The college does a lot of business with it, and we pay like everybody else when we do, and then we own it too. So it's we might build a 150-room hotel, and we're
what's that cost?
On that.
If someone's listening and they want to put their name on the Hillsdale Hotel, so it'll be like the Hewitt Hotel at Hillsdale, how much is that check?
That I don't know. That's a negotiation. The hotel will cost somewhere along about $50 million to build, and it'll be pretty. One of the great hotel designers is a guy named Gary Kerner. And he's done a lot of famous hotels. And we have these classical architects who work for us. We're planning to work on the library and some stuff near the chapel in the North Quad, we call it. And so one of these classical architects calls up this guy, knows who he is, and says, I want you to, I got a hotel project. And the guy said, good, tell me about it. And he said, it's in a small town. And the guy said, I don't do small town. And he said, well, it's connected to an interesting college. And the guy said, I don't do colleges. And he said, it's an interesting college. And the guy said, which college? And he said, Hillsdale College. And this guy, Gary Kerner, said, I'll do it. My kids went there.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah.
Oh, that's
so
grand.
I didn't know it. And,
that is grand.
Yeah. And he's got some beautiful designs. It'll be pretty. And it'll look onto the campus in interesting ways. So it's, we're thinking about building a bunch of stuff at Hillsdale because our library has become crowded. Against my every wish and effort, the student body has grown about 60% since I've been here. And
you have a real problem, Dr. Arnn, and you've been my friend for 30 years, so I can be blunt with you, is that the brand is bigger than the campus. People want to go to Hillsdale in great numbers, and that is a wonderful problem to have, but I wouldn't want to try and solve it.
Yeah, it's, we have decided to, I've been against the growth of the campus almost since I came here. And why? Because it's tight and everybody's got to be a volunteer and everybody's got to work and, we got to get on well. And so that's more important than size. And it'll always be small no matter how big. If it got to be 10,000, we wouldn't know each other anymore. So right now we're at 1,650, and we've decided not to worry about it until it gets to 2,000.
Well, you just gave me the perfect transition. I have been wading through the Republic of Plato with Professor O'Toole, and I mean, it's gotten to be heavy going for me again in Chapter 4, the end of Chapter 3. they're talking about the size of the city, and Socrates says, well, it can't be too big, but it can't be too small. Otherwise, we'll lose what we're about. Are you just basically channeling the Republic for me?
Yeah, that's in Aristotle, too. And that means that, in classical philosophy, the solution to most prudential problems is the Goldilocks solution. Not baby bear and not Papa Bear, but Mama Bear is about right. And so how big is Mama Bear? And that's prudential things. You can't really, there's no absolute way to say. So
I've got to tell you,
I don't even know.
You're going to join us next week when we resume the Republic. It's hard going for me. And that's probably because it's been 50 years since I took a course on it from Harvey. And Professor O'Toole is very good at this. Do you find the book hard, or do you find you're enchanted by Aristotle's ethics? Are you enchanted by the Republic the way Professor O'Toole is?
Oh, sure. It was a life-changing thing for me. It's the reason I'm not a lawyer. It's the reason I know you. If I'd become a lawyer, I probably would have never met you. And I found an argument in book 1. When we come on, I'm going to talk about it because there's some chance that I might be better at simplifying than my worthless son-in-law.
He's very good, and he's very nice with me, and he's gentle because I ask them questions. I'm sort of like Thrasymachus, I think, in I get frustrated with the argument. And book 4 will be it. But
he is brilliant. He is brilliant, and he's a very serious Plato scholar.
Fabulous.
At that point, being nice with you, that's not a good policy. What's he doing?
All right. Let me get to the serious stuff because we're coming up on the end of this segment now. I'll get serious, especially in segment 3. As we stand here in the first full week of the presidential campaign, how do you view it? And you're nonpartisan. Hillsdale's nonpartisan. Just objectively, what do you think the situation is?
Well, the situation is it's close. Who knows where it stands, by the way. Polls are rotten and people are not candid and people will think about it a lot more between now and they're starting to vote pretty soon. And that's a shame, I think. But and there's a debate coming up. So those will be formative things. Right now, the campaign is interesting to me. And that's because of 3 people. I think J.D. Vance and Tulsi Gabbard and Robert Kennedy Jr. have brought interest to the campaign on a big scale, and I am intrigued by them. I like them, and think that they're odd, and I think that they might be important in the result.
I'm going to play for you some J.D. Vance clips in the 3rd segment today because he was on my guest 2 days ago on Wednesday. And he made some news, and I'll play you the clips that made news. But it's the fact that he is so smart, Larry. That is
smart.
It's difficult for media to deal with smart people. It's very easy to deal with people who are not gifted. I don't think Kamala Harris has the minimum skill set necessary to be president. Do you?
I do. She's a member of the elite, and these days, that's very important. He has that skill set. I don't think she's quick or particularly bright. I guess I think that. I think she's a very purposeful woman. And I think that her story, so I think in the case of those 3 interesting people, and they're all very odd people, by the way, their campaign emerges from their story, what they're like. They've got some serious convictions. Some of them, in the case of RFK in particular, they jangled a bit. Environmental lawyer, big liberal family, all that, and he mistrusts the government these days, and I do too. But it's all, when you read about them, it's embedded in them. They've been working on it for a long time. And it emerges. I think that's true of Donald Trump, too.
By the way, I agree with you completely. We got to go to break. When we come back, I'm going to talk with you about Kamala Harris is not that interesting. And I do not think constitutionally she's qualified. She's over 35 and born in the United States. That's it. But I don't think she could do the job in 1,000 years, no matter if she had the best staff in the world. If she had your staff, she still couldn't do the job for reasons we'll talk about after the break. Don't go anywhere, America. I'm going to play some of the J.D. Vance interview for Dr. Arnn in segment 3 today as well to get him to react. But stay with us. I'm Hugh Hewitt. The Hillsdale Dialogue underway. All things Hillsdale are found at hillsdale.edu.
Hillsdale College is a small, Christian, classical liberal arts college that operates independently of government funding. And we want you or your son or daughter to apply. At Hillsdale, students grow in heart and mind by studying timeless truths in a supportive community dedicated to the highest things. Hillsdale College costs significantly less than other nationally ranked private liberal arts colleges and receives regular recognition as a best value, and nearly all students receive financial aid. Our robust core curriculum, vibrant student life, and 8-to-1 student-to-faculty ratio make for an education like no other. For more information or to fill out an application, visit hillsdale.edu/info. That's hillsdale.edu/info.
Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. Dr. Larry Arnn is my guest because we're in the Hillsdale Dialogue, and this is the Friday before a debate on Tuesday night that may, in fact, impact the election. And my advice to Donald Trump, I gave it on the air to Larry Kudlow this week, is say nothing at all when she is speaking, Kamala Harris, and say nothing about her, but ask the moderators questions that they should be asking her. What advice would you give Donald Trump, Dr. Arnn, and what advice would you give Kamala Harris about this debate?
Well, those things are, you moderated those debates, right? They're terribly unpredictable.
Yes.
And they're made much worse because they're brief and they're interrupted. So if you read through the Lincoln Douglas debates, which we've done on your show, there's a relentlessness about them. The issues are complex. And Stephen Douglas is very effective, but Lincoln broke him down. And part of the reason was he had time to do it. And it was just those two guys talking for 30 and 45 minutes at a time, an hour, the longest, at a time, just one guy talking with,
I think it was an hour, 90 minutes response, 30-minute reply, and they turned. So it was an hour, 90 minutes, 30 minutes, no moderators. 7 times.
Yeah, they varied that a little bit, but that's roughly what it was. In other words, Lincoln, who was a genius and extraordinary man, he broke him down. He broke Douglas's health, finally. Douglas
I didn't know that.
When it was over. His career was shattered by that. He did one last honorable thing. Back then, you didn't campaign for president. They were running for the Senate in 1858. And so Douglas did. And he campaigned exclusively in the South in favor of keeping the Union together. And I think that was a very honorable end to it.
Is there a good biography of Stephen Douglas? I've never thought to read one, but I don't know if there is one.
There are a couple, and we can post it on your website because I can't remember the name of the author right now. But there's one in particular that's pretty good. And, in Harry Jaffe's great Crisis of the House Divided, that book, it's a very great book, and it dwells on the strengths of Douglas. Douglas was very formidable, and it sort of makes the case for Douglas, although he's a Lincoln man, makes the case for Lincoln ultimately better.
There's a new book out called The Demon of Unrest by Eric Larson, which does not give Lincoln his due. It's about why did the war come? And it does not give Lincoln its due. And Eric Larson is a very popular writer. It's a bestseller, and it focuses on Fort Sumter and what the election of Lincoln meant. It's so tempting to authors, Dr. Arnn, to go after Lincoln, but they shouldn't unless they've really done the work, or they will not get it right.
Yeah. The first job, there's not much in politics, ever, and certainly not now, where you do the thing you should do, which is, to make the case against somebody first you have to make a case for them, right? Like I've been taught by great scholars, and everybody's a partisan these days. So Harry Jaffa, for example, who was a great scholar, is thought to be a partisan, and that's because you just identify it, but make the case, right? And he, in his Lincoln Douglas debate book, in his Lincoln Douglas confrontation book, Crisis at the House Divided, he makes this. So you got to do that, right? And the first thing would be give an account. Why is Lincoln important and regarded as so great? Is it just some big mistake here? It's been going on for, 150 years now. That's where you go wrong. Because once you do that, by the way, that lays out your task, what it would take to overcome that. And
so you've got enough to do. But if you have any bandwidth at all, if you read that book and review it for the Journal, I think it would be a useful service to get people back on the right track. You've written about Lincoln yourself. We've talked about Lincoln a lot on this program, but nevertheless, a popular author comes along and he blows it with Lincoln. I'll be right back. Don't go anywhere.
Here's a book. Oh, you got to go.
We got to go to the break. We'll come back and we'll get the book on the other side. Hillsdale.edu for all your Hillsdale needs. Hugh for Hillsdale.com for all of these dialogues. Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. The Hillsdale Dialogue is underway with Dr. Larry Arnn, president of Hillsdale College. Your application for Hillsdale for next year can be found at hillsdale.edu. All of the things Hillsdale, all of the courses that they have videoed and put up there are all for free. Imprimis can be signed up for free. It's all at hillsdale.edu. And all of our 800-plus Hillsdale Dialogues are collected at hughforhillsdale.com. Dr. Arnn, before we went to break, you were about to mention a Lincoln book. Which book was that?
No, it's not a Lincoln book. People should read a new book by Neil Gorsuch and Janet Nitze called Rule. And it is gripping and terrible. And it will set you up to think about this election, because what it's about is there's a story of somebody abused by laws that nobody understands. And then an account, and these are interspersed, of how many laws there are now and how they get made and how different that is and the reasons behind it and how much the founders were against that kind of thing. And it's just terrible to read and great to read.
Here is the book.
Summarize one.
Here is the book.
Oh, yeah.
Justice Gorsuch was my guest about a month ago, and you are absolutely right. It is a fabulous book. But what is the one story you were going to...
Isn't he great?
Yeah.
And, I don't even like some of his opinions, but he's a talent. I met him just one time, and I told him that he'd written the most eloquent opinion in 50 years, and he replied, rubbish. And then I proved it to him. I held up a copy of Ranks versus U.S., which you can look up on the internet. And in that, he's trying to understand the meaning of a federal law. And he diagrams a sentence the way you learn to do in school if you go to a really good school. And he diagrams this sentence in this law. And I said, and I held it up. I had it on my big iPad. I held it up and I said, nobody else has done that. And he said, yeah, I guess that was pretty good, wasn't it? I said, that thing is famous at Hillsdale College. And he said, God, I hope it's accurate. And I said, good enough for a C at a good college.
Well, I hope he comes and gives a commencement. He does. I believe we have a regular listener in Justice Gorsuch, so I hope he does go in there. Now I want to get to the J.D. Vance interview I did on Wednesday. There are two excerpts I'd like your comments on. This is the beginning of the interview with J.D. Vance from Wednesday. My first question goes to the tragedy and the horror of this weekend. 6 hostages executed by Hamas, one of them American, Hirsch Goldberg Pullen. What is your reaction to what Sinwar ordered his terrorists to do?
Well, obviously, first, our hearts go out to the innocent people who are affected, especially an American citizen. I think it's despicable. It's also, frankly, entirely predictable. We know who Hamas is. We know the problems they have. We know the fact that they felt emboldened by Kamala Harris's policies, and we know they've been enriched by Iranian money that has flown to them because of Kamala Harris. So this is not unexpected, and it's going to keep on happening unless we fix this.
Second question, Senator. The same question that I asked you was asked of Governor Walz at the Minnesota State Fair. He was answering questions. He had answered 2 questions. The third question was his reaction. Not only did he not answer, he turned and walked away. What does that tell you about Tim Walz?
Well, I think it tells us that he's a little too close to Hamas. This is something we've known about Tim for a long time, that he hosts Hamas.
That's enough. Larry Arnn, that was direct and it made news. What do you think of the first question, the second question, and the directness of the Vance answer? A little too close to Hamas.
Well, I've already said I'm really interested in that guy. I wrote a defense of him in the Wall Street Journal, and he says in his convention speech, that it's our home we're supposed to defend. And he was criticized for leaving out the Declaration of Independence. And my point in my article was the Declaration of Independence requires that we defend our home. After all, what does consent of the governed mean except we get to set it up for ourselves? And he hasn't denied that. He's right about it. But he's very smart. And see, this inability to, so there are 3 opinions about Hamas. Aren't they great is one opinion. And that's all over college campuses, all over America. Yes. Breaking out this fall as it made them dysfunctional. They couldn't have class in very important and rich old colleges. They were unable to have class in the spring because of the agitation in favor of Hamas and against the Jews. That is shameful. The middle opinion is, well, they're hard done by, and we have to understand them, and we have to cut the baby down the middle and understand the Jews are colonists too. That's the middle opinion, and that seems to be Walsh's opinion. And then there's another opinion. These guys are a bunch of murderers and despots. You can't be on their side, whatever the facts. And so that would be my opinion.
And that is J.D. Vance's opinion. Let me play for you the second and far more adjacent to our typical fair question that I asked Senator Walz on Wednesday. Play cut number 1. Are we in a constitutional crisis because I believe President Biden is incapacitated?
Well, I think we're in a constitutional crisis in 2 ways, Hugh. First of all, we increasingly see evidence that bureaucrats in the Biden administration have promoted censorship of their political opponents. But you also, of course, have a president who clearly can't do the job. I mean, he went on a 40-day vacation, shows up to give one speech with a teleprompter at a rally with Kamala Harris, and I think, frankly, scared everybody, Democrat or Republican, about whether he can actually do the job. This is a real scandal, Hugh, and it implicates Kamala Harris directly. Why did she lie to the American people for 3.5 years about whether this guy could do the job? She saddled the United States with a president who was unable to do what is necessary to discharge his constitutional responsibilities. If that isn't a constitutional crisis, I don't know what the term means.
Your assessment, Dr. Arnn, of that question and answer.
Well, that was good. Yeah, right. Remember you asked me at the beginning of this, was she up to the job?
Yes.
Looks to me like the standards of the job have changed. And the government has changed a lot, right? And so how important are elected officials anymore, right? There are 3 changes in the government. They're massive. They're world historic in their scale. They've been going on since at least 1930. So the government is much bigger than it used to be. The economy has grown 1,600%, 1,700% since 1930. And the government has grown more than 10,000%. That's one change. The second change is the government is centralized. In 1930, the money raised and spent in the government, almost 2/3 of it was in cities, counties, and towns. Now it's almost 2/3 of it federal, right? And then finally, we make and execute our laws differently than we used to. That is to say, they're made in these administrative agencies. It's in the Gorsuch book, by the way.
Yes, it is.
There's a controversy about how many law, not even which they are, how many lawmaking agencies are there in America? It's somewhere around 150, apparently, but nobody can agree on the number. And nobody can agree on the number of laws that they make. And they also enforce those laws, right? So what forces are responsible for, in a 24-hour period, Joe Biden being emphatic that he's in the race and going to be reelected, and then 24 hours later, I'm getting out? How did that happen? Why did that happen? And who made that happen? Who knows, right? Hard to say. And did Obama make it happen? Many people say that. You know, Obama is not in office. How did he make it happen? And so, in other words, the requirements of the job, you know, my own view is that the hope for America is in the electoral process, which is itself distorted in many ways now, that somebody will get elected who actually represents the interest of the people and will assert that against this permanent state.
I call it the cartel now, because I don't like the term the deep state, because that implies people who drag you out of your house at night and you're never seen again. We still have the habeas corpus petition and the great writ stands, but we do have a cartel that's made up of the Democratic Party, its elected leaders and its funders, and the legacy media, as well as the senior bureaucrats in this vast, sprawling state, local, and federal government. And it's inimical to a free people's rule. And we have to change it now, or we won't get it back. 1 minute to the break, Dr. Arnn. Do you think we are really at a turning point here? Because I do.
I do, yeah, I do. And remember, you know, we don't drag people out of their houses at night, except we do. And we don't drag them out for political opposition, except we do.
We do.
And there are a lot of people spending a long time in jail who they're not incommunicado, and they can go before a judge, but they don't get out. And the Supreme Court has ruled that many of those charges are unconstitutional.
That is correct.
Yeah,
and we also have pro-life protesters whose house are stormed. We have Donald Trump, who's still the subject of lawfare and may be sentenced next week. I don't know. I'm coming back right with Dr. Arnn for one last segment before the big debate next week. Don't go anywhere, America. The Hillsdale Dialogue continues.
Hey there. Today I want to tell you about the Hillsdale K-12 Classical Education Podcast. This unique show explains how children benefit from an American classical education. Whether you're a teacher, student, or parent, you'll find something of value on the show. You'll hear from teachers and administrators from schools around the country, as well as Hillsdale professors and friends who are leading the effort to revive the American tradition of K-12 education. When you listen, you'll learn all about classical education, what it is, how to teach it, and why it matters today. And there are dozens of back episodes on specific topics, like teaching Singapore math, reading great books, and even understanding how athletics is critical to a child's development. Listen every Monday on podcast.hillsdale.edu. That's podcast.hillsdale.edu, or wherever you find your audio.
Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. Dr. Larry Arnn is president of Hillsdale College. And I think the last question I want to ask you, Dr. Arnn, is how do you prepare your students for what is a never-ending battle against the centralization of governmental power? I don't know that we can win this. It's 2.89 million federal employees. Even if Trump is reelected and the Republicans hold the White House for 12 years, the longest they've done in my adult lifetime in a row, 12 years. They'll only get 3,000 appointees, and there are 2.9 million federal employees. That does not count the military. So how do you prepare your students for that battle?
2.9 million plus 3 million contractors who are more or less
true
ongoing employees of the government. Well, the answer is to prepare anybody for anything, the first thing you have to do is look away from the immediate. And so, you know, we read the classics and we read the founders and we read the history of the country up to the current day. And so you have to see through all of this, you have to get perspective. And you won't get it from the press, because they don't have it themselves, and they've been heavily partisanized now. So you've got to read some old books and think about them and talk about them and argue about them with other people. And the first step is, by the way, it's not to decide who's right. Plato and Aristotle have disagreement, for example. And Plato was Aristotle's teacher. So what do? The first question is always, what does this say? What does it mean? Remember what we said about when you criticize somebody, it's a good idea to understand them first.
Correct.
I have a freshman who just announced to me that he's a follower of Friedrich Nietzsche. And I said, well, that's dumb. Let's figure out why. And, he's already writing me. Let's have lunch. See, he wants to talk. And he's a very, very nice young man. And, I just met him. But the truth is, we're going to figure that out, right? What, in fact, does Nietzsche say? And how, in fact, does that compare to other arguments by other people? And that he has, just like me, just like all of us, he has to go through that in order to be able to estimate the great issues in public affairs. That's how you compare.
That's so interesting. We've never spent a minute in 800 plus hours of radio talking about Nietzsche because I loathe him. And I suppose that shouldn't be a reason for selecting. I mean, he's easy to read. He's not very hard to read, but not like The Republic, which is hard to read. Why have you? Nietzsche
is very serious, right? I had a graduate school seminar, one of the best classes I ever took in Nietzsche, and I sat through it 2 more times just because the teacher was so good. Harry Newman, a self-professed nihilist, by the way. I don't think he really was. I think he was lying, but he was a great teacher, right? And Nietzsche is an alternative, and he went nut, by the way. And I mean, literally, and you would too. I mean, he was crazy, but he was poetic, and he saw the nature of the crisis, and he tried to solve it. And see, here am I blowing off about Nietzsche now. I know a little about it, but he's profound. He tried to solve it by the will to power, one of his books. And what the will has to will is the good of everything. We can and that's the eternal return of the same. That stuff is crazy.
Well, in the Republic, there's a line where Socrates says to his interlocutor, the city will be a wheel that goes around and around forever if we get it right. Isn't that the same thing you just said?
Yeah, that's right. And he, on different grounds, Nietzsche identifies Socrates in classical philosophy as the spirit of gravity holding us down. Now we have to liberate ourselves from that. So he's no classic follower, but he's, look, you have to confront the fact. Eventually, first thing is get a sense of the basic, get a sense of what those guys were rebelling against. Martin Heidegger, often styled to this day the greatest mind of the 20th century, was a Nazi.
A Nazi. Yep.
That's nuts. And Karl Marx is supposed to be serious. He was a communist. I think Heidegger is probably more serious than Marx, but they're both crazy. And so, to get, one of the things of which I am the proudest is we have 4.6 million, I think it is now, online students. And the completion rates in the courses are astronomical compared to others, and high anyway. And people take the time to understand.
Because
We've
people
kept this crazy show up.
Because people want to know. They do not want to be stupid.
Yeah.
They want to know. Dr. Larry Arnn, I look forward to talking to you and Professor O'Toole next week after the debate. We will be talking back at the end of Book 3 and the beginning of Book 4, and we're going to summarize where we have been for slow people like me. Larry Arnn, thank you. All things Hillsdale at hillsdale.edu. All of these dialogues, including all the ones on the Republic, at viewforhillsdale.com. Thank you, Adam. Thank you, Dwayne. Thank you, Harley. I'm Hugh Hewitt. Talk to you Monday on the next Hugh Hewitt Show.
Thanks for listening to the Hillsdale Dialogues, part of the Hillsdale College Podcast Network. More episodes at podcast.hillsdale.edu or wherever you find your audio. For more information about Hillsdale College, head to hillsdale.edu.